Before we dive into this epic tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more thrilling sci-fi adventures. The day began like any other, with the usual hum of life in the small town. In an unremarkable corner of Earth, a man named Victor lived a quiet life, far from the bustling cities and far removed from the galactic chaos that humans often dreamt of. Victor was a simple man, content with his work as a mechanic, the days often stretching into one another like a monotone rhythm of mundane tasks. Yet, within the stillness of his world, there existed an emptiness that was only ever filled by his quiet thoughts and the company of his daughter, Emma. Emma was his light, his reason for waking up each day. She was the warmth that kept the chill of solitude away, even in the darkest hours. Victor had raised her alone after her mother had passed, and it was a bond forged not by blood alone but by the silent understanding that, despite the loss, they were all each other had. Victor had always been protective, a bit overly so at times. He couldn't afford to lose another person he loved, and Emma had never complained. She loved her father deeply, and together they made their way through life. But one fateful evening, when the sky was nothing but a blanket of thick clouds, and the stars seemed dimmer than usual, something happened that would forever change their quiet existence. Victor had been working late, as was often the case, when Emma, who had been playing in the yard, came running into the house. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Daddy? Something's out there. Something in the woods," she gasped. Victor set his wrench down, irritation mixed with concern. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What did you see?" I don't know. It was like a light, and then it crashed. It sounded like thunder, but different. Like it was from far away." A chill ran down Victor's spine. He tried to brush it off as Emma's imagination running wild, but something about her voice, her tone, made him pause. Grabbing a flashlight and telling Emma to stay inside, he stepped into the darkness, the night air heavy with unease. The woods that bordered their home were not the sort of place one ventured into at night, but his curiosity and the unsettling urgency in his daughter's voice were enough to pull him forward. He moved through the trees with purpose, the beam of his flashlight dancing across the thick underbrush. The bond between the Earthling and the alien child grew stronger each passing day. The child, once an unknown creature from beyond the stars, was now part of their life. She began to speak in a language that was strange, yet familiar, and with each new word she learned, the Earthling's heart swelled with love and pride. The girl had transformed from an alien orphan into a cherished family member. Her innocent smiles and innocent touch were a constant source of joy. Every small victory, like her learning to eat with a fork or her fascination with human music, was a reminder of how much she had come to mean. Despite this growing connection, there was something undeniably strange about her. It wasn't just her appearance. Her alien features, a blend of humanoid and extraterrestrial traits, still sent a ripple of disbelief through the Earthling's mind. It was how she behaved, the way her eyes glowed faintly when she was deep in thought, or how objects would occasionally shift around her when she was angry or upset. It was as if the girl possessed an energy beyond comprehension, an otherworldly aura that could never be fully explained. But the Earthling pushed those concerns aside. After all, love doesn't come with explanations. It just exists, and it grew stronger with each passing day. The girl's name was a mystery for a long time. The Earthling had never heard of anything like her. But after days of gently coaxing, the girl finally began to speak, not in human language, but in strange, melodic sounds. It was as if her mind was working through the complexities of communication, trying to make sense of a world so foreign to her. The Earthling, ever patient, spent hours each day trying to teach her English, repeating simple words and encouraging her when she made an effort. In return, the girl began to develop an understanding of basic human concepts: love, family, and safety. However, as the girl's language skills grew, so did the Earthling's growing concern. There were moments when the girl would say things that didn't make sense. She mentioned names of places no one had ever heard of, talk about things no human could have known. The Earthling thought it was just the girl's mind trying to piece together her past. but a lingering unease slowly crept into their heart. It was clear now that the child was not just an ordinary being. Her intellect was too advanced, her presence too otherworldly. Yet they still clung to the hope that the girl was just a lost soul, an orphan in need of love. Life, however, wasn't without its challenges. The girl had her quirks, moments of startling strength, bursts of psychic energy that left the Earthling questioning what they were dealing with. There was one incident where, during an intense emotional outburst, objects in the room began to levitate, and the air itself seemed to hum with a strange energy. The Earthling, at first terrified, realized that the girl wasn't trying to harm them. She was simply reacting, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't fully grasp. It became apparent that the girl had abilities far beyond any human child. The Earthling tried to keep these moments under control, fearing what they might mean for the future. But the real test came when the girl began to dream. The Earthling often woke to hear the girl whispering in the night, speaking in an unintelligible language. Sometimes she would call out names, unfamiliar to the Earthling but resonating with a strange intensity. These dreams weren't the ordinary nightmares of a child. They seemed to carry a message, a warning, perhaps, or a call to something greater. But what? The Earthling couldn't answer, only holding the girl tightly and comforting her as best they could. There was a growing sense that something was watching, something was waiting. In the midst of these oddities, the bond between the two of them only deepened. The Earthling came to see the girl not just as a child in need of protection but as a source of wonder. She was a mystery, yes, but she was also family. And family meant protecting her at all costs. They were becoming inseparable. The girl no longer seemed like a lost alien, she was the Earthling's daughter, in every way that mattered. But the shadow of the unknown loomed large, and the Earthling knew deep down that they could not hide from the truth forever. There was a part of them that was terrified of what would happen if the girl ever learned the truth about herself, about who she really was. At the same time, the girl began to grow more curious about her surroundings. She would wander outside, gazing at the stars with an intensity that spoke of something far deeper than childlike wonder. She was drawn to the night sky, as though something in the stars was calling to her. The Earthling tried to explain that the stars were just distant suns, but the girl didn't seem to understand. Her eyes would light up whenever she saw a shooting star, and she would murmur something under her breath, as if making a wish. But what did a child like her wish for? Things began to change once the girl turned 6 years old. Her abilities, once subtle and easily dismissed, began to manifest more frequently. It was then that the Earthling knew they could no longer pretend. This was no ordinary child. There were things about her that defied all logic, and the Earthling had to face the truth. The girl wasn't just an alien. She was something far greater, something whose destiny had yet to be fully realized. Despite their growing fear of the unknown, the Earthling couldn't bring themselves to push her away. They couldn't turn their back on a child who had already captured their heart. They had raised her, loved her, and in return, the girl had offered them a bond that transcended anything the Earthling had ever known. In their heart, they knew there was no turning back now. The girl wasn't just an alien orphan, she was family. And no matter what her origins might be, they would stand by her side come what may. Still, the Earthling couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the horizon, waiting. There was an undeniable pull to the girl, as though she held the key to something far more significant than they could possibly imagine. And while they would protect her, the Earthling knew that their simple life would never be the same again. What had started as a quiet, isolated existence was now a ticking clock, with the weight of a galaxy's future slowly pressing down on them. The girl's future, and possibly the Earth's, was now tied to forces they couldn't even begin to understand. It wasn't just a family anymore. It was a story that was unfolding, a mystery that would eventually need to be solved. The Earthling could only hope that when the time came, they would be ready. But for now, they cherished the quiet moments, the laughter, and the love that had filled their home. The unknown could wait. For now, they had each other. The Earthling's world began to shift as they grappled with the growing unease that had taken root in their heart. The girl, now more than just an orphan alien, had become a source of both wonder and fear. There were moments of pure joy, when her laughter filled the air and her innocent questions about human life made the Earthling smile. Yet there were other moments when the girl's powers seemed to surge, uncontrollable and strange, leaving the Earthling with a deep sense of foreboding. They could no longer ignore the truth. The girl was no ordinary child, and her existence was tied to forces that spanned far beyond their understanding. As the girl grew, so did her abilities. What once appeared to be mere glimpses of power had now become undeniable. Her psychic energy, once subtle, had begun to manifest in more obvious ways. The Earthling watched, helpless, as objects would move in her presence, sometimes levitating in the air, other times breaking under the pressure of her anger. It wasn't malicious, but there was a raw intensity to her emotions that sent ripples through the very fabric of their existence. The Earthling had never witnessed anything like it, and the thought that the girl might be a weapon, an uncontrollable force, terrified them. They began to wonder if they were simply trying to protect something far beyond their ability to understand. The girl, for her part, seemed just as confused by her powers. She had no understanding of the consequences when her emotions flared. Sometimes, the Earthling would catch her staring at her hands, as if she could feel the force inside of them, but didn't know how to control it. She often looked to the Earthling for reassurance, her big, innocent eyes pleading for guidance, for understanding. The Earthling would hold her close, comforting her, telling her that everything would be okay, though deep down they feared the opposite. It was becoming increasingly difficult to protect the girl from the knowledge of her own power. She had started to ask questions that no human child should have to ask. Why was she different? Why could she do things that no one else could? Why did she feel like she didn't belong here? The Earthling couldn't answer. They didn't have the words to explain that the girl was not from their world, that her very existence was the result of a cosmic accident, a convergence of forces that should never have occurred. They couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. She wasn't ready to understand. But that didn't stop the Earthling from feeling the weight of the secret. It was a burden they hadn't expected to bear, and it was beginning to take its toll on them. They couldn't shake the feeling that there was something larger at play, something beyond their control. One evening, as the girl was playing outside, the Earthling stumbled upon an old artifact hidden deep within their home. It had been there for years, buried beneath the floorboards, an object the Earthling had never thought twice about. But as soon as their hands touched it, they felt a surge of energy, a rush of power unlike anything they had experienced before. The artifact, glowing faintly with an alien light, seemed to resonate with something deep within the Earthling. For a brief moment, they felt a connection to something larger, something ancient, something cosmic. It was as if the artifact itself had a purpose, a hidden significance that only now was beginning to reveal itself. The Earthling had no idea what it meant, but they knew one thing: the girl, and everything surrounding her, was far more important than they had ever realized. The artifact's presence stirred something within the Earthling, a memory of a time long forgotten, a time when the stars themselves seemed to call out to them. They tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, gnawing at them. The girl, who had been so playful just moments before, now seemed distant, her eyes locked onto the artifact with an intensity that made the Earthling's heart race. For the first time, they felt the full weight of their decision to bring her into their life. They had no idea what they had done, what they had unleashed. The girl's behavior grew increasingly erratic as the days passed. She would have sudden bursts of energy, her powers flaring up without warning. Objects shattered, windows cracked, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with a strange energy. The Earthling could no longer ignore the truth: the girl was dangerous, or at least, the potential for danger was there. They had always hoped that with love and care, she would grow to understand her powers, learn to control them. But now, it seemed like something was changing inside her, something beyond their reach. In a desperate attempt to gain some understanding, the Earthling began researching the origins of the artifact, trying to find any clue that could explain its significance. What they found sent chills down their spine. The artifact wasn't just an ancient relic, it was a key. A key to something much larger, something cosmic. According to the texts they discovered, it was linked to a royal lineage, an ancient dynasty that had ruled the stars for centuries. The girl, they realized with a shock, wasn't just an orphan, she was a princess, a member of a royal bloodline far beyond anything the Earthling had ever imagined. Her powers, her abilities, her very existence were all part of a legacy that spanned the galaxy. But why had she come to Earth? Why had she been abandoned? The answers seemed elusive, hidden behind a veil of mystery. The Earthling knew that they couldn't protect her forever. Sooner or later, the truth would come out. There were forces at play that the Earthling couldn't control, and they had no way of knowing who or what might come looking for her. The girl's destiny was intertwined with something much larger than themselves, and the Earthling couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely pawns in a game they didn't understand. Despite the fear and confusion, the Earthling couldn't turn their back on the girl. She had become their family, and no matter what her true identity might be, they would protect her. They had no idea what the future held, but they would face it together. The bond they shared was stronger than any alien lineage or cosmic fate. They would stand by her side, no matter what. The girl, still innocent and unaware of the truth, continued to cling to the Earthling for safety and love. And for the Earthling, that was enough, for now. But deep down, they both knew that their quiet life, once so simple, was on the brink of an inevitable change. The Earthling's peaceful existence came to an abrupt end when a signal pulsed through the artifact, releasing a frequency that echoed beyond Earth's atmosphere. Unbeknownst to them, it was a beacon, one meant to summon forces that had long been dormant, waiting in the shadows of the galaxy. Within days, anomalies began occurring in the skies above Earth. Government satellites detected unknown movements. Signals jammed. Observatories went silent. What began as minor disruptions soon escalated into undeniable events. Ships, cloaked from human detection, began approaching Earth's orbit. The girl felt it first. Without explanation, she awoke in the middle of the night trembling. She wasn't afraid, she was aware. A buried instinct had surfaced. Her lineage had been triggered by the pulse from the artifact, and something inside her responded with clarity. Her eyes glowed faintly as memories not her own danced at the edge of her consciousness. She saw cities made of crystal, starships the size of moons, empires ruled by bloodlines she had no memory of. But most of all, she felt a presence, cold, ancient, and closing in. Earth's military grew uneasy. Reports leaked of an unidentified aerial phenomenon that defied physics. Power grids flickered across major cities. Communications blacked out intermittently. The public was told it was solar flares. The Earthling knew better. The artifact had triggered this. The girl's presence had not gone unnoticed. The beings approaching weren't here by accident. They were searching for her. And they were not coming to offer sanctuary. The Earthling went into hiding. The girl, though still a child in many ways, sensed the danger. She became quieter, her eyes searching the horizon, her senses sharpening. She had changed. The power within her was evolving rapidly. The Earthling noticed the subtle shift. Her control had improved. She no longer caused things to shatter or float by accident. Now she could calm a storm by simply reaching out. It wasn't training, it was instinct. She was awakening to her purpose. Then came the arrival. A vessel entered Earth's orbit, cloaked in a gravitational shadow. Its presence caused tides to shift and weather patterns to distort. Hidden from the naked eye but not from classified defense networks, the object hovered silently. Attempts to communicate failed. Attempts to retaliate were even worse. A defense satellite attempted a lock. It vanished. No explosion. No trace. It was simply gone. Earth's leaders were silent. Panic set in, but quietly, under veils of control. Within hours, an agent appeared at the Earthling's door, heavily armed, highly classified. He didn't ask questions. He made statements. "You're harboring a threat to national and planetary security. Surrender the girl." The Earthling refused. Not out of defiance, but out of instinct. The girl wasn't a threat. She was the target. And the ones seeking her were far more dangerous than anyone could comprehend. The agent left. Minutes later, the Earthling's house was surrounded. Drones hovered overhead. Vehicles parked in the woods. The Earthling grabbed the girl and ran. Through the chaos, the girl remained calm. Not passive, aware. She whispered a word the Earthling couldn't understand. The forest bent around them, hiding their presence, cloaking them in silence. Something old had awakened in her. It wasn't just power. It was heritage. She wasn't merely a royal, she was the last of a forgotten bloodline whose history was soaked in war, betrayal, and sacrifice. The empire her ancestors once ruled had collapsed centuries ago. But factions remained. And one of them now hovered above Earth, eager to reclaim the last living heir. They made contact. Not with Earth's governments, but with the girl directly. She heard them in her mind. A voice ancient and cold, offering promises of restoration, safety, knowledge. But underneath it all, the Earthling recognized the manipulation. These weren't saviors. They were scavengers of legacy, seeking to use the girl to reignite an empire lost to time. They didn't want her safe. The ship left Earth's atmosphere in silence, but the echoes of what had transpired remained etched in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The world would never know the true nature of the event, only the vague reports of a sudden light in the sky and a mysterious disappearance. But for the Earthling, the silence that followed was louder than anything they had ever known. The girl was gone. Taken. Not stolen, not kidnapped, taken by her own people, by duty, by a legacy too vast to ignore. And yet, even in the crushing emptiness, the Earthling felt something else, a promise unspoken, a bond that defied time and distance. The girl, now Princess Illyra of the Thalnari Ascendancy, was no longer a child in need of rescue. She was the heir to a civilization older than humanity, destined for a throne that bore the weight of galaxies. And still, her final glance, tearful, longing, human, remained burned in the Earthling's memory. That look said more than 1,000 speeches ever could. It said she remembered. It said she would never forget who gave her a name, a home, and love when she had nothing. Royal lineage had called her back, but her heart remained torn between blood and bond. The galaxy, however, showed no mercy for such sentiment. As Illyra ascended into her rightful place, political factions within the Thalnari court challenged her legitimacy. Accusations flew that she had been tainted by Earth's primitive culture, that her time among humans had weakened her resolve. Yet none could match her raw psychic prowess, now fully awakened and terrifying in its scale. She stood unshaken, tempered by years on a dangerous world, raised not with entitlement but compassion. And so the court, however grudgingly, began to bend to her will. But it came at a cost. With each political maneuver and show of power, Illyra felt the growing distance from the only person who had ever seen her as more than a symbol. The Earthling had never asked for anything in return, not obedience, not gratitude, not power. They had only offered kindness, even in fear, even in ignorance. And though she ruled worlds, the girl who had once asked why the sky was blue missed the Earthling's quiet answers more than the stars now bowed before her. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Earthling found themselves drifting in a life that no longer fit. The home was quieter. The nights felt colder. People noticed the change, but none could understand. How could they? The Earthling bore a grief not of death, but of cosmic separation. Yet they found solace in the smallest things, the way the sun rose the same way it always had, the flowers Illyra used to pick, the crayon drawings she'd left behind, simple, messy things that once annoyed and now felt sacred. They had raised something extraordinary and let her go without chains. That had to mean something. Years passed. The world moved on, unaware that the galaxy itself had shifted around one human's act of compassion. But fate, as it often does in stories like these, was not yet finished. One night, the Earthling awoke to a soft hum vibrating through the air. A familiar glow pierced the darkness. The artifact, once dormant, had returned. Not just a relic now, but a conduit. A message pulsed through it, not in words but in memory, in feeling. It was her. Illyra. Across uncountable light years, she reached out, not as a queen, not as a warrior, but as a daughter. The Earthling wept, not in sorrow, but in recognition. The bond had not broken. Time, power, politics, none of it had erased the truth. somewhere in the stars, the child they had raised still remembered. And that remembering had meaning. It had weight. Illyra's message was clear: she had become what destiny demanded, but she had not forgotten who made her strong enough to carry that burden. Galactic history would record her reign as one of unity. She would abolish centuries-old blood laws, open interstellar dialogue with younger civilizations, and reign in the war machines of noble houses long addicted to conquest. Under her rule, Earth would go from forgotten backwater to key diplomatic hub. But none would know that the real beginning of this transformation was not in a council chamber or battle, but in a quiet home, where a human had once fed a scared girl soup and tucked her in beneath warm blankets. Illyra would never return permanently. The political complexities were too great. But every few years, when the stars aligned just so, a small, unmarked ship would land in a remote field. And from it, a woman with violet eyes and a crown of light would walk into a familiar house, sit on a worn couch, and speak with the person who had shown her the meaning of home. Those meetings were brief, sacred, never photographed or documented. And yet, they were more real than any throne room. And when the Earthling finally grew old, the galaxy paused. Word spread silently, relayed by couriers who understood without needing to ask. A great hush settled across the Thalnari systems. Stars dimmed. No decree was issued. No mourning parade held. But Illyra disappeared for a full cycle, seen by none, save for the lone ship that returned to Earth under silent escort. When she emerged again, something about her was different. Her voice was softer. Her power sharper. And when she next addressed the council, she began not with titles, but with a story. A story about a planet called Earth. About a human who took in a girl with no name. About kindness that asked for nothing. And about the truth that even in a galaxy of empires and warships, the most powerful force is not fire or metal or law, but love. And so the story spread, not as myth, but as history. A strange one, yes? An unlikely one. But one that reminded every being, human or not, that greatness often begins in silence. That heroes do not always wear armor. That royalty is not defined by blood, but by the courage to be gentle. In the end, the Earthling was given no medals, no monuments. Just memories. And those, Illyra ensured, would never fade. Not in her heart. Not in the stars. Not in the world she ruled. Their names, both of them, would echo, long after the galaxies had forgotten war and power. They would echo because they had once chosen love. And in that choice, they changed everything.